Polpo opened in 2009, just a little while after Lehman Brothers collapsed and the global recession started. And it was a combination of two ideas I'd had. One of them was the idea of bringing a New York-style eatery, bar, wine bar, restaurant, whatever you want to call it, to London. And the other idea I had was bringing a small backstreet wine bar, the places that Venetians call Cookery, to London. And those two ideas sort of joined together over a course of, I guess, 3 or 4 years while I was working for a company called Cookery Holdings. And then, after having a chat with my best friend and now business partner, Richard, we decided that it was something that might capture the imagination of Londoners and of diners. And so that's how Polpo was born. And yes, we opened in September 2009. And thankfully, everybody liked it. Italian food is incredibly broad. It's almost, in some respects, like different countries. If you compare the south, the extreme south, Sicily and Puglia, for example, to the extreme hilly, mountainous north, they really are very different cultures as well as different cuisines. And Venice, even though it's sort of part of the Veneto region, it in itself has its own idiosyncrasies and quirks too. So there's a lot of Venetian cooking that is about the region, but there is a part of Venetian cooking that is about the specific area. So Venice is an island surrounded by the lagoon, sort of a combination of sea and sort of inland water, and it produces some unusual species which are very important in when it comes to Venetian cuisine. Things like moeke, for example, which are little soft-shell crabs. They're between 2 stages of development, and so they're neither one thing or another, and their shell becomes soft so that they can grow into the next version of themselves. And it's at that point, around about this time of the year, funny enough, that they're caught and dipped in delicious parmesan batter and then deep fried. So it does have its own distinct flavour, to excuse the pun, its own distinct character, but it is also part of the region and part of northeast Italy as well. The other thing to say about Venice is that it has a reputation, I think quite a deserved reputation, for being a dreadful food destination. A lot of the restaurants in Venice are awful. They pander to the lowest common denominator requirements of tourists, and peddle the sort of food that really is below awful sometimes. I saw a restaurant on a recent trip that proudly displayed a sign in the window saying 127 different types of pizza, which is as far away from Venetian cooking as you could possibly get. But there are these very small and very authentic places, usually family run, that stick to their guns and produce beautiful, authentic, delicious local cooking. The cookbooks I've always used, and I guess referred to, and these books I guess were important when it came to thinking about the sort of recipes and the sort of food that we wanted to serve at Polpo, were books like the Harris Bar Cookbook. I don't think it's been out of print since it was first published, and it's a really useful and really practical cookbook that doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It just delivers very authentic, simple, delicious recipes from the region, and that's a book I still use today. As is the sort of cliche. There are some pages that have stuck together because there are dry tomatoes and curling onions and so on stuck to the corners. I've always loved one of my first books. In fact, I think it was the first cookbook that I ever bought, a book called Keep It Simple by Alistair Little. And I think I bought that shortly after a small epiphany, a little moment when I was around about 1991, 92, when I was at Le Caprice in St James, just behind the Ritz. And I was eating a Caesar salad. And the little epiphany was realizing that good food didn't have to be complicated, it could be incredibly simple. And it was around about that time that I found a great recipe for a Caesar salad in the book that I just mentioned, Alistair Little's Keep It Simple. I think I've got everything that Marsala Hazan has written. I think I've got everything too that I'm trying to think of my other Italian, trying to picture my Italian cookbook section. Claudia Roden is a huge inspiration, I guess, not just because she understands food so well, but also because she writes so beautifully. And her books on Jewish cooking and Italian cooking have obviously been very influential in the restaurants that I've set up over the last 3 years. I was approached by a different publisher actually, and then a couple of weeks after that a second publisher, and then a couple of weeks after that a third publisher, and I took some advice from my then publicist Tanya, and said, well, what do I do? She said, well, you don't do anything. What you need is an agent, and an agent will guide you through the process. So she introduced me to my agent, who did guide me through the process, and we sort of, we stacked up the different approaches from the publishers, and I put a little proposal together, and we sent that out to other publishers, and got a great deal of interest. Bloomsbury was one of the publishers that was interested from the start, and yeah, they stayed with the process right to the end, and at the end there were two publishing houses that were bidding for the book.
Quite a nice feeling.
It's a lovely feeling, yes. And I'm sort of, I'd like to say, and I think it's quite important that I decided to go with the underbidder, Bloomsbury, because I felt that it suited Polpo a lot better than any of the other publishers that we've been speaking to. There was an integrity, I suppose, with Bloomsbury, and an authenticity. And I guess, as with everything, it's always at the end of the day about relationships. And I felt that I could work better with the editor, my editor, Richard Atkinson, than any of the others that I've been introduced to. The design of the book came from the design of the restaurants. It doesn't take a huge leap of imagination to look at the book, look at the restaurants and see the connection. And at one of the very early meetings with Richard and with David Tanguy, who's the head of Praline, who designed the book for us, at one of those very early meetings, I said something almost throwaway, like, wouldn't it be great if the book looked like the restaurants, stripped back, rustic, almost exposed? And I think it was those three thoughts that David took away and then came back to the second meeting with the idea of exposing the spine, for example, keeping everything within the two covers, incredibly simple, like the restaurant and like the recipes. And that was the starting point for the design, and also for the, I guess the whole approach to the book as well, in terms of writing and in terms of photography. And it was that thought that brought us to Jenny Zarin's, whose photographs I think are incredibly raw and simple and beautiful. And it was Richard's great skill to hone my writing down to something that was less. What's the word? Less ambitious, let's say, and a little more prosaic. And I'm delighted with the results. I think that process was really important in disciplining me as a writer, and in producing the sort of prose that that when you open the book you now see.
Did you actually enjoy it though?
I really enjoyed the writing process. I've got to be honest, I found the editing process quite painful in places, but I'm delighted with the result. Yeah. I spend most of the year practicing for Christmas Day, really. And pretty much every Sunday I roast something, whether it's a joint or a bird. There's always a roast in the oven somewhere on a Sunday throughout the year. So when it comes to Christmas Day, it's a walk in the park, exactly. Yeah. So this Christmas Day we'll be in London. I'll be with my wife and 3 children. And there'll just be, I haven't decided which bird, but there'll be a big bird in the oven, and far too many roast potatoes, far too many vegetables, and we will somehow manage to eat it all by around 6 o'clock on Christmas Day.
And then fall asleep.
Sorry?
And then fall asleep.
And then fall asleep, yeah, and complain that we've overeaten and do it all again the following day.
Yeah, I know you've expanded somewhat since 2009.
Yeah.
Different restaurants now. What does that mean for future books? Would we expect a Spontino book at some point? Is that,
Well, it's funny you should say that. After the Waterstones event tomorrow, my editor is buying me supper at a nice restaurant in Chelsea, where we're going to have a discussion about that very subject. So it would be premature to say anything today, but who knows, by Friday morning we may have an announcement.
Terrific.